Today on the podcast, we are talking about a sensitive topic, difficult client situations. So this is going to be a part 1 and part 2 series. So the episode after this will be on the same topic because I think there's just so much to say about this. And I wanted to create the podcast episodes that I personally needed years ago when I was in the midst of problems with clients. So this first episode is about what to do when you're in it right now. Like you have a difficult client situation, maybe an angry client, maybe you're angry at your client. Regardless, you're just feeling like, I don't know what to do next and I need help. You're stressed, you're overwhelmed. Maybe you even want to throw in the towel with your business. I have been there, and in this episode, I'm going to teach you 10 specific tips on how to deal with a difficult client situation. So we're going to get through this together in this episode. Everything is going to be okay. You've got this. Now let's dive in. Hey guys, it's Elizabeth McCravey, and you're listening to the Breakthrough Brand Podcast. Each week, I'll bring you workshop-style trainings that teach you how to stand out online, design success from the inside out, and create a breakthrough business. It's time to turn viewers into raving fans and design the business and life of your dreams. I'm so excited you're here. Okay, you guys, this is a big episode. So like I said in the intro, this is a part 1 and part 2 series. I have an 11-page outline for this episode. So it's going to be long, but it's going to be really, really good. I've put a lot of thought into everything I'm saying here. So today I'm talking to the person who is in the midst of a difficult client situation. This could be a really dramatic situation with lawsuits and refunds and angry text messages and things like that. Or it could be a situation that's more tamed, like the client just telling you they're unsatisfied or you being frustrated with something they said, or maybe they're asking you to start over, something of that nature. It could be many different levels here. There's such a huge range. So no matter where you are, though, this episode is something for you. And next week, we're continuing this conversation with an episode about how to prevent difficult client situations from happening in the first place. So this episode you're listening to right now assumes that the damage has been done. There's already an issue. And so we're going to talk about how to deal with that. But then next week, we're talking about how to prevent the issues from ever happening. So these two episodes really go together well. And now let's just get straight to it. So I have 10 different things we're going to talk through. Some are longer than others. And the first one, you guys, this one's going to seem so basic, so do not turn me off if it's too basic for you. But my first tip is to calm down and pause. And again, this might seem like a lame place to start, but I want you to hear me out. If you are in the thick of what feels like a horrible, devastating situation, you've got to pause and cool off. Listen to this whole episode. I know it's going to be a long one. Listen to the whole thing and take a break right now from communicating with your client. That is my biggest piece of advice. So don't message your client when you're angry and heated. Just like in a fight with anyone in your life, like whether it's a family member, a spouse, a friend, anyone, you say things you'll regret when you're heated up. So I want you to pause the conversation until you can cool off. So I know a lot of times, and maybe this is you, but when a difficult client situation is happening, the client might be contacting you a lot. Like maybe they're sending you multiple emails or calling you or texting you or something like that. And it's just constant communication. Or maybe it's the reverse and you're doing that to them, you keep messaging them. And I just want to say it's okay to wait to respond. Even if you're listening to this and it's 10 a.m. on a Tuesday and you're wait, but it's the work day, it's okay to not respond. And I know for myself, in one of the most difficult client experiences I've ever had, as I said, I've had 2 times that were really tough. This person was emailing me from their phone late at night and saying a lot of really cruel things to me. And I didn't have to reply. I shouldn't have replied, but I was heated and hurt and I felt really defensive and I kept responding because of that. And that's one of my biggest regrets about that situation, is that I wish I just would have not responded responded and waited till later and thought things through more. So I remember that night so clearly. It started while I was at the gym and I left my workout early to call the client. And then I remember laying in bed that night, like 10 p.m., crying as I messaged with this person. And it was really unhealthy of me to keep responding. It was not professional of me to keep responding. And I think the whole situation would have gone down better if I had waited till the next morning or even the next afternoon to respond. So that was a mistake on my part. So learn from my mistake. I definitely learned from it myself that like I need to not respond when things feel heated. Or maybe it's the reverse for you though, and you're the person that's sending a lot of messages to a client. You're like the one starting the conversation and keeping things going. I want to say it's okay to stop, to wait, to cool off. You can tell them like that you're signing off for this reason, but like you'll continue the conversation later. I have a lot more tips on that coming, but just wait and cool off. So that's my biggest piece of advice. Pause. Get counsel from someone who is removed from the situation. They don't even have to be a business owner to be someone who can give you good advice. Just getting another perspective is huge. And yeah, when we hurt, we often say things and do things that we don't mean. So I want you to avoid that as much as possible. So that's your first tip. Stop engaging, cool off, keep listening to this episode. And maybe while you're listening, go on a walk. Just leave your office in general. If you work from home, go to another room, go to the gym, go to some coffee shop, like just leave the current space you're in and find a way to let yourself cool off. For me, walking is a great way to cool off. So if it were me right now getting this episode when I was upset, those early days in business with that client situation, I would have gone on a walk. So that's my advice. Okay, now let's get into some more practical things. So tip number 2, be a leader and set boundaries. So you are the boss, they are the client. And I'm going to talk about this one on part 2 next week as well in more depth, because I think this is something you'll want to set up from the beginning of a project before you're in a bad situation. But even once something feels difficult, you can step in and become a leader now, even if you weren't doing this previously. So like right now, it's very possible that like you have not been leading in the project you're in, which I'm going to advise you to listen to next week's episode to like with some tips on how to get better in that. But even though you haven't been leading now, you can still kind of like undo it and go ahead and start leading. So remember that you are the boss, you're the leader, and they are the client, the customer. And even though it might sometimes feel like the client wants to be the boss to you, or maybe you even want them to be your boss because you're kind of used to being just like told what to do from your previous job or whatever, they are paying you to lead them to an end result through your service. So you need to lead them. And I know sometimes it feels like you just got to do what the client wants to do. The customer's always right. I agree with that statement to some extent, but you're the boss, they are the client. So like as an example of the way this can play out, I sometimes have people tell me, I get a lot of emails, by the way, with people who have, or messages on Instagram even, but people who have difficult client situations asking for advice. That's also what some of these episodes are inspired by. But I've had people tell me things like, ugh, my client won't stop texting me. Like, what do I do? And then I ask, like, did you ever text them first? Did you tell them not to text you? Like, is there a boundary there? And typically the answer is no, they didn't set a boundary around this. Maybe they never told the client they don't want to be texted. Maybe they texted them once randomly, all kinds of things like that. So you are the leader of the project. They are paying you to lead. So if you start texting your clients, they're going to see that as like, oh, she prefers to communicate with texting. Like that's just a natural, like human response to you doing that. If you don't tell them how you'll be communicating, but like, let's say they personally prefer texting. They don't like to email. They like to text. Then you can expect them to text you when they have a question because you haven't told them what you want them to do in the first place. So you have to set the boundary. You have to set the expectations. And many times, difficult situations with clients, this is where it starts with boundaries and expectations. So that you didn't set a boundary or your expectation and their expectation for the projects are not aligned, which that's what I'm going to get into heavier next week. But assuming you're in the midst of the issue, you cannot turn back time with this client, unfortunately, and set a boundary. You can still set one after the fact. So you can start right now. now. So here's an example. Let's say you just have the little frustration of your client is texting you at all hours of the day and night and with questions, and you don't want to be texted. You did something though to make a mistake to where they think you're okay with them texting you. So this is what you want to communicate to them. Maybe you're saying like, I would rather be contacted on email or Voxer or Basecamp or something like that. Maybe that's what you prefer. Here's just like a quick example of something you could send them as a message. So here's what you could say. Hey, thanks for letting me know this about whatever they told you. Quick question for you. I'd like to switch our communication from texting to emailing. Would that work for you? I think that by emailing instead of texting, I'll be able to keep our project more organized and we'll be able to consistently respond during my normal business hours. I should have told you this when we started the project, so I take full responsibility. Would moving over to whatever form of communication work for you? So that's just a rough example of how you could lead and set a boundary after the fact. And usually, you guys, with that request, the client is not going to be upset. I know this is like a mild example of a bad client situation, but this is a really common one. And when you just ask something like that and you say it respectably and you're not like, you won't quit texting me. Why don't you know you shouldn't text me? You know, something like that. You're taking ownership. And typically they'll respect what you're asking because you're asking in a respectable way. So look at the situation you're dealing with, whatever it is. Maybe it's way bigger than what I just used as an example, but consider that maybe the client doesn't realize they are doing anything wrong because you weren't leading them. Okay. So just whatever it is, I want you to think about like, what is the issue this person is doing that's frustrating you so much, and consider that maybe they don't realize it. Consider the best in them, that maybe they don't realize they were doing anything wrong because you weren't leading them, and forgive yourself for that. And then you can start leading them now. So for more on being a leader from the get-go of a project, I want you to listen to the episode after this one. But I want you to ask yourself right now, surrounding the situation you're in, what new boundary can I set that would help things go smoother? And maybe use that example I just kind of said as a way that you could kind of set the boundary of saying like, I realize I didn't tell you this previously, but I'm asking you this now. And I think it's good to ask versus saying like, this is what you have to do now. Okay. But maybe your situation is really bad at this point and you're like, Elizabeth, we are past the point of texting being an issue. And I totally get that. And it might not be about boundaries. That's what's going on. I've certainly been there with the difficult client situations I've had that I referenced already. And that's okay. Keep listening. I got advice for you too on those things. All right. So our third tip, ask, how can we make this right? So be looking for solutions to the issue before you're looking for a way out. I know it can be easy to just be like, oh my God, I just need to like never speak to them again. I need to cancel this project. I need to get out of this. So be looking for solutions first, because even if you do end up ending the project with a refund or without a refund or whatever, you still need to like make it right to some extent. And it's still something you can't ignore. So with the situation you're dealing with, ask yourself, what do you personally want out of this? And I think sometimes we miss asking that question and we just think about like what appears to be our options, but you actually get to decide. Again, you are the leader. So maybe you want to give them a refund and move on. Maybe you need to part ways without a refund or with just a partial refund. Maybe you need to have a conversation with them about a boundary for the relationship. Maybe you need to talk expectations. Maybe you just need to apologize. Like maybe that's all it is, and like continue with the project. So consider what your ideal situation will be with this person and then try to make it right in that way. And so I'm going to talk about some ways right now of how to make it right. So the first thing, take the emotion out of it. Okay. And that's so hard to do, you guys. I have been there. So like perhaps your client has said something really cruel to you, and that cruelness makes you feel emotional, which makes sense. Like let that be okay that you feel upset when someone says something cruel or degrading and hurtful to you. But I want you to like be okay that it upset you, but then take the emotion out of what they said to just hear or read whatever it was without the cruelness, and ask yourself if there's any validity to what they've said? And is there anything you can take away from it? Okay, so like hearing it, taking out the cruel parts and asking, like, is there truth to this statement? So maybe they said some really mean things, been there, but then there is like a truth of it, of something you did wrong in the situation. There always is something we could have done better in these situations, which I will get to, but kind of take the emotion out of it. So the second thing, affirm what they are feeling. So when people are upset and acting out, know that they just want to be heard most of the time. So show them that they are being heard by affirming what they're saying. Show empathy and describe to them what you're seeing. So saying things like, I'm sorry you're feeling X. I see and hear that you're upset about Y. I understand that you are unsatisfied with Z. And then affirm that their feelings make sense. So like stating back to them, like, I'm hearing you say this, and I have empathy that you're feeling that way, or that you're unsatisfied with this thing. Like, I think just sometimes people are like aggressive because they're just like, they want to be heard. And maybe that's how they were taught growing up or in other relationships in their lives, that that's the only way to be heard. So they're doing that with you. People bring so much stuff into business relationships that we don't realize because we only know them in a business context. Okay. So that's the second tip. Affirm what they're feeling. Okay. And then the third thing with this, tell them what you're going to do to help the situation and suggest action steps. So after you've affirmed that you hear and understand their need or concern, present them with options for what you want to do to fix it. Maybe it's just one option. Maybe you have like 3 options you're wanting to present. That goes back to what I was saying of like, you need to decide what you want out of this. And I think it's good to remind people too that you're on the same team as they are. So they might feel like it's them against you, and reminding them instead like, hey, I know you're feeling X and I want you to know we're on the same team. I want you to have a satisfying experience working with me, and I want this amazing end result for you too. We want the same thing. Okay, so like reminding them of that. And then giving them options for what the next steps could be. Interrupting this episode with a suggestion for the small business owners listening. Ever wonder what you should do for healthcare when you and your spouse are both self-employed, so there's no work-provided health insurance to participate in? Well, when my husband Adam joined me in the entrepreneurial job space over 4 years ago, we joined Christian Healthcare Ministries instead of getting traditional health insurance. And it was the best decision for us, especially in these years of growing and raising a family while also running multiple businesses. CHM is a health cost-sharing ministry and is a faith-based alternative to health insurance. We did tons of research before choosing CHM, and if you know me and Adam, you know we are all about doing the math when making big or small financial decisions. And even though it's not insurance, CHM shares 100% of eligible medical bills, which is more than the typical 70 or 80% of medical bills paid for by insurance companies. All sharing is determined by the CHM guidelines, which you can check out before and after joining. And for the mamas and mamas to be listening, you truly cannot find a better healthcare option for maternity care. I had a vaginal delivery and a C-section and birth center care and hospital care between my 2 pregnancies and births, and it was all 100% shared for. And outside of birth, we've had our share of emergency room visits and procedures as a family, and those costs were all shared by members at Christian Healthcare Ministries, leaving us only paying our monthly contribution. CHM is less expensive month to month than insurance, and because there's no network, you can choose your care with whichever providers best fit your family. I seriously just cannot recommend Christian Healthcare Ministries enough. You've got to check them out. Go to elizabethmccravey.com/CHM for more information. Also putting that link in the show notes, elizabethmccravey.com/CHM. Now back to the episode. So for example, if you think that like y'all are no longer the right fit for each other, you could say, if you think we're no longer the right fit for each other, then we can do X or Y. Or you could say something like, if you want to continue working together, then we can do, this and that. Kind of telling people things like that, of like giving them very clear and defined options, not like I'm kind of feeling like maybe we should pause this, but instead like, remember, you are the leader. Like tell them what the options are and what you think, you should do here. And I also want to say on the note of making things right, this feels like an appropriate place to throw this in. This does not mean that you're letting someone speak poorly to you or degrade you in any way. So I don't want you to hear me say that, because I think every client situation that is difficult is going to be so unique, which makes this episode really difficult for me to give advice. Because like when I was thinking about outlining this, I was like, wow, there are situations on one end where people are being like harassed and lawsuits are happening and things like that. And then there's other situations where a client's just kind of annoying you. So there's like a wide range of things here. And I don't know your unique situation. So I want you to know that like I wish this episode could cover everything under the sun about this, but it can't. So I'm going to do my best here. But I did have a client in this example I've referenced who was just like actually being mean. And they were like cursing, calling me names and that sort of thing. And so like with that, I can affirm what they're feeling and I can take the emotion out of it, even when it's that intense. But I can also say to them, if you continue to speak to me like that, then this is going to happen. Of like setting that boundary, setting that expectation that like, you might be paying me to do this job, but like, I'm not going to like be talked to like that. So just know that if you're in an intense situation like that, where you're being harassed or bullied or anything like that, I am not saying just let it happen and take the emotion out of it. Like, that's not what I'm saying. You should still stand up for yourself, but you can still see, is there validity to what they're saying? You can still affirm what they're feeling, and you can still approach it with kindness and grace and being a good leader through it. So that is my third tip, asking how can you make it right? And then kind of talk those things again. So you want to take the emotion out of it, affirm what they are feeling, tell them what you're going to do to help the situation by suggesting action steps. So those are kind of the steps there. All right, now on to tip 4. Talk on the phone, video, or in person when possible. So people are nicer on the phone or in person than they are in email or texting when they are angry. It's such an interesting thing. This is why there are cyber bullies. So they will see a human element more when they hear your voice or they see your face. And it's such a great way to calm down the situation and get everyone level-headed. So unfortunately, mean people are meaner when they can hide it behind a screen, and that might not be the way your client is, but who knows, it could be. Either way, people are going to be nicer on the phone. And I want to say here, talking on the phone or doing a video call or asking to meet in person with someone who's angry with you takes you being a leader and having some courage. So when you do this, know, like, props to you. You are going to grow so much as a business person by doing this, by like taking the step and having the courage to like go into a difficult situation. So just like it can be easy for the client to want to email you their complaints and like not talk about it, it can also feel easier for you to be like, I'm just going to email with them instead of talking. But talking is what solves things faster and better. So if you're thinking, but Elizabeth, I don't want to talk to them, I'm so nervous, they're mean. I get that, but it's a good practice and it might be what saves the situation. And like I said already, it's going to make you such a better leader to be able to like be bold enough to like address these things head on versus hiding behind a screen. So I think a great start would be to call the client, kind of have prepared what you're wanting to talk about, maybe even go ahead and know kind of what solutions you're thinking are the right solutions, but call them and say like, hey, I can tell that you're really upset from that email and I would love to talk through this on the phone and hear your concerns. Is now a good time? Can you talk me through what's going on? And like just being so kind, being so gracious, and really I kind of did these in a bad order, but going back to what I said in step 3 of asking like, how can I make this right? And hearing what they say, taking the emotion out of it, affirming what they're feeling. I'm sorry you're feeling X. I see and hear that you're upset about this. And then telling them your action steps. Or like on the phone, you guys, I know because it's like in the moment, you don't have time to think about it the way you would with an email. You might be like, I actually don't know what the solution is. And you could, in the call, saying, I really appreciate you bringing all of this to my attention. I'm going to spend the next hour coming up with a solution, and I'm going to email you or call you back with my answer. Does that sound all right to you? You know, something like that. Okay, so that's number 4 though. Talk, don't text or email. Okay, number 5, be honest, not defensive. So similar to the last thing I said about speaking on the phone in crisis situations instead of emailing, that takes courage. This also takes courage because I'm basically calling you to lead with vulnerability in a situation where you probably feel vulnerable in like the worst possible way. So When you're defensive, you make someone want to fight back. People go into fight or flight mode. They're like, ooh, this person's attacking me. I got to attack back. And that will typically create more drama. And I want to say here too, when I say be honest, not defensive, this is not a time for your excuses, and no one cares about your excuses, which I know sounds mean, but really, I mean it. No one cares. Your client does not care about the excuse you have for why they're unsatisfied. And I think excuses is one of the worst things I see people do when a client's slightly upset, that just makes the situation go from like 0 to 100 fast. And I've seen this happen many times with other people who are business owners, and hearing people talk about situations with people they hired. And it's like they do something that's unsatisfying. And then instead of the person saying, I'm really sorry you're feeling this way, here's what I'm going to do to fix it, the person says like, I would have done it sooner, but I'm sick, or, oh man, I would have, but I ran out of time, or really sorry, but I have too many clients right now. Like they tell you all these things that like aren't your problem, but then that's their excuse. So I want to say like, please don't do that. Like don't say excuses. It's okay to like explain something, but don't use it as an excuse. You still need to like be as much as possible not defensive. So when you can be open and honest and maybe a bit vulnerable, I really believe you can like create healing for a situation that might feel like it's not healable. So even though it sometimes doesn't feel like it when you're hurt or angry, remember that both you and your client are real people with real lives, real businesses, families, struggles. And when you can drop the drama, you realize that both of you just want what's best for the situation. Like you just want them to be happy with the end product, and they just want to be happy with the end product. And I know some of you listening might be thinking like, no, Elizabeth, my client is mean. They don't want what's best for me and they just want drama. And that might be true. I don't know, but just still thinking about them and remembering that people act out in certain ways in business relationships because of how they feel in personal relationships. It all connects. And I think in most situations, honesty and vulnerability helps. So that's my 5th tip. That's a short one, but just be honest, not defensive, and reread what you're sending before you send it. If you're emailing or something, or even speaking, this is going to be a time to like really think well before you speak, but like ask yourself, is that me being defensive? Is that me like hiding behind something that's not the truth? Is that me being deceitful? And try to focus on being honest and not defensive. Okay. Number 6, I like this one. So don't be afraid to offer a refund or end the project, even if that means you might lose money or obviously like lost time. So I think this is a big one that a lot of people struggle with. Don't be afraid to offer a refund. Refunds do not mean you're bad. They do not mean you failed. It does mean that like the situation wasn't right, but it's not like the worst thing that can ever happen in a business, okay? Refunds aren't always the answer, but sometimes the situation is so bad where that just makes sense, and like exiting the project is going to be the best thing for everyone. So I would say definitely don't leave a project incomplete and then not give a refund. I would not recommend doing that. If you're choosing that you need to discontinue working with this person, you should do a partial refund or full refund or something. Definitely refer back to like whatever you say in your contract that you both have agreed to, which I will talk about next week about the importance of contracts. But unless they've done something that violates your contract, you want to be like really specific with that. And there's a lot of things here that like I can't get into because it's so specific to your own situation. But in general, remember that a refund does not mean you are horrible. You're always growing. So just make sure that the refund has a lesson in it that will prevent you from a bad situation in the future. Remember, I said refunds aren't bad, but I'm saying like learn from the refund experience that was bad. So I know sometimes though, a project can feel so defeating and so lost that the only solution feels like anything. So do it then, offer a refund. Only you know what's right for your business. And if that sounds like the best thing for you and the client, I think it's good to do. I have done that once. In of my 2 examples, I had one ended in a partial refund and the other we finished up the project and just continued working together. So I honestly think that in many years of business, like if you've been in business a long time, you have never had someone ask for a refund on your product. I know it's a little different with services, but definitely with products. If you've never had someone want a refund, you are not going wide enough with your audience. I heard someone say that once. I cannot remember who, but if you're not having some people request refunds, you're not attracting enough people. Because if you're attracting a lot of people, technically someone's going to end up not being the right fit, and that's okay. So I've had to take that approach a little bit with my website template shop, which we have like an extremely low refund rate. I think I've done just 2 or 3 refunds in the whole time we've been in business. But again, I don't see those refunds as bad things. I see them as like I casted the net wide of who this could be good for, and it wasn't right for these people. And in those situations, it was very clear why it wasn't right, and it was all good. So just know that like it doesn't mean you failed. Like someone asking for a refund is not like, oh my gosh, everything is wrong with my business. Why would someone not like it? Like totally normal, not a big deal. So remember, don't be afraid to offer a refund or end the project. And again, I know like a hard thing there too is like sometimes when you end a project with just a partial refund or something like that, you're going to like lose money because you've done work that you might not be being paid for now. And I think if for your own sanity, that's what you need to do, then you should do it. All right, number 7, apologize when you mess up and try to make it right. So that feels like such cheesy advice, but sometimes we can think that it's a difficult client that's the problem. Like talking to you right now who's like, but my client is the problem. I know, but sometimes you also made a mistake too, and you need to own that. And this is the same as it would be in any relationship. Genuinely apologizing for a mistake and owning it as your mistake, then making it right is extremely healing. Like think about times in like any relationship in your life where you've been upset, someone like apologizing and meaning it makes a huge difference. So don't be so blind and angry that you can't apologize when you need to, and saying something like, I'm sorry I did X, I messed up, how can I make this right? Or I'm doing this thing right now to make this right with you. Sometimes apologizing is all someone really wants and needs. So when this is like a simpler problem, because again, I get messages on Instagram with people asking me for client advice. And a lot of times it's stuff like this where I'm like, just say you're sorry. Or like people who are like sticking so tight to the contract that they're ending up with unsatisfied clients. That always irritates me. So like if your client's asking for something that's not going to inconvenience you that much and will really add to the experience, I say just do it. If it's not going to like be a huge thing. And I'll talk about that next week. But I think like the idea of being a contract stickler is also something that leads to unsatisfied clients. So anyway, that's off tangent now. But that's number 7. Apologize when you mess up and try to make it right. Number 8, remember that you are not always right and that this is a learning opportunity. So as Brene Brown says, I love her. So she says, there is no innovation and creativity without failure, period. No innovation and creativity without failure. So know that you are not always right, and try to see this difficult situation as an opportunity to learn, which I know sucks to hear when you're in the thick of a bad situation. You're like, I feel devastated. I feel like I'm going crazy. I don't want to just learn right now. And you might even be wondering, like, do I have what it takes to be a business owner? Like, I have been there of feeling so run down by a project that I'm like, can I even do this? And I'm going to talk about that in my tip number 10. But I think sometimes in fights, we can get so wrapped up in seeing a client as bad or they're wrong that we become blind to the ways we messed up too. And this is especially important for preventing future issues. So if you fall into a difficult client situation once, like think about like, how do I not fall into this again next time? You know, which I'm talking about that, preventing future issues on the next episode. But you also learn from it and like avoid it next time by acknowledging that you played a role in it too, because you always played a role. Like, I hate to say it, but you always played a role. Like, even if you have like the perfect project system, you've never had someone unsatisfied before, you likely played a role in the situation too that made it go sour. Like maybe you didn't communicate something clearly. Maybe the client's expectations were higher than what you were providing. There are so many different things. So this is really important for preventing future issues. And I would recommend like maybe journal about what you could change up for next time. Like look at the situation and look for the red flags with things you did with the client, all of those kinds of things, so you know how to prevent things in the future. And I know that both times I've had difficult client situations, I messed up too in some way, maybe by not communicating properly, by not setting proper boundaries. You could be ignoring red flags, having a weak contract, things like that. And all of those things are things you can learn from. And I did learn from them in my situations. Like I have not had situations like that again since this happened to me because I learned from my mistakes. And now I'm getting to teach you guys from my mistakes. So to close out that one, remembering you're not always right and it's a learning opportunity. I like this quote from Bill Gates. So he says, your most unhappy customers are your greatest source of learning. So that is basically the point of this segment, is that they're your greatest source of learning. So learn from it so you don't have the same mistake again. Okay. Number 9, have grace and remember that you don't know what people are going through. So we never know what's causing someone to act a certain way in these business relationships. So they could be going through something horrible that you know nothing about because you guys have a business relationship, not a friendship in most situations. So you know this person in a very unique way, in a unique context. So they could be having difficulties in their marriage, relationships with their children. They could have lost a loved one and you don't even know it. Maybe triggers from past abuse, maybe current abuse. You literally never know what people are going through. So we don't know. And so grace is vital here. And we are called to love our enemies. So this might seem like a weird place to go with this. And I actually debated whether or not to share this, but this fact is one of the things that I think I've learned most from the times I've had difficult client situations. So let me explain this. So for those of you who are in a situation where you feel like you have the worst client ever, and they're horrible and hateful. Okay. I know some of you are there right now. Some of you are like, oh, it's just a little issue. But if that's you right now, if you're like, they are the worst ever, I want you to hear this. They feel like an enemy and you're called to love them anyway. And again, I know not all difficult clients will feel like enemies, but if yours does, hear me out. So Jesus calls us in multiple places in the Bible to love our enemies and even to pray for them. So he says in Luke 6:28, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, which I feel like I never thought a ton about that verse in day-to-day life until you're in situations like this. So my dad actually reminded me of this scripture when I was dealing with one of these difficult situations with a client. And it's hard, you guys. And I remember being on the phone with my dad, I was venting like crazy to him about this. He's been a business owner his whole life and has owned multiple businesses, so he understands in a unique way what these kind of woes could be like. And I was just venting, and I was so mad and so upset and crying and all of these sorts of things. And I remember him just kind of asking Elizabeth, have you prayed for this client yet? And then I'm like, no. And then he encouraged me to go do that, to go pray for them, and then to call him back when I had, and we were going to talk about it. And through that situation, I really learned more, and I feel like I could do a whole episode on this, and I'm probably going to not explain this as well as I would like to here, but I learned more about what Jesus meant by loving and praying for your enemy. Because again, that's not a verse that we necessarily think about every day. So Jesus makes it clear in scripture that loving those who love you is easy, right? It's easy to love someone who loves you. But by calling us to love someone who hates us or who hurts us or is kind of mean, he's calling us to do something that's contrary to our human nature. That's not what feels normal to us, to love someone who's hurting us. And we don't have control over other people's actions, but we do have control over how we respond to their actions. And that's such a great thing to remember here, you guys. You can't control your client. You can't control their acting, but you are in full control over how you respond to what someone else is doing. And I think that if we know someone's whole story, if we knew the whole thing, we knew what was in their heart, we knew what their feeling was, we knew their motivation behind why they did or said what they did, we would realize they aren't actually our enemy. And most people are not malicious. They aren't really your enemy. They aren't meaning bad. They just, they're lost maybe. Like the verse, I can't remember where this is in the Bible, but forgive them for they know not what they do. So with my personal, most difficult client situation, the last thing this client said to me was so hurtful and really disturbing, honestly. So I'm telling you guys, I know mean clients, and this was the client my dad was telling me to pray for. And so when I prayed over this client on multiple occasions, I realized how they are hurting and how me holding a grudge against them for this helps no one, especially not me. It does not help me to think about it and hold a grudge all the time. And honestly, the whole reason I'm even able to talk about this is because I'm not holding a grudge anymore. So I worked on letting go of the drama I felt from the situation. I prayed for God to work in their life on whatever it is they were going through. And I prayed that they would have kindness, that they would feel kindness from me. And this is also a case where, like, you guys, when you're dealing with a difficult client, kindness can change people and turn away anger. So even though, like, you might have said something to a client that you regret already, like maybe right now you're like, oh, I was a little harsh, I fought back. And you're like, oh, I wish I wouldn't have said that. You can always now be intentionally kind to them. And I think that really helps. It helped me in my situations of being intentionally kind, and kindness like trumps cruelty, so to speak. So if you're someone who is proclaiming Jesus as your savior too, this is a great opportunity for you to like show that to this person, whether they're a believer or not, it doesn't matter. It's a time for you to say like, hey, I'm going to show kindness and I'm going to love you and I'm going to show respect, and try to serve you the best way possible and help the situation. So might seem like weird advice here, but pray over the situation. Ask God for his guidance and pray for your difficult client. And I'm not saying pray that they'll quit being difficult. You can pray that too, but like pray for resolution. Pray that the Lord will work in whatever it is that's going on in their life. It's okay, you guys, to start a prayer with being like, I'm really upset. I don't really like this person right now, but like I know I'm called to pray for them. And you guys go back to scripture and read, what was the verse? Luke 6:28, around that whole section, and in other gospels as well, is where Jesus talks about that a lot. And so reading about that, maybe reading like some commentaries on it, all of that I think will be really helpful to you. And you'll hear me tell you this like time and time again on this podcast. If you're a regular listener, you already know this, but I often will say, go back to God time and time again, because I believe this will change things for you. Like prayer changes things, inviting God into your business changes things, like asking him for counsel changes things. So that's my big advice on this one. And I hope I spoke well here. Sometimes I feel like I can not say things as clearly as I'm thinking them. So I hope that makes sense to you all. And I hope that's helpful. So have grace. We never know what people are going through. And now to my final tip. Don't let people who you don't respect speak things over you. Okay, so in difficult client situations, I've referenced here in the one I've referenced the most, this person said some pretty nasty things to me that made me doubt everything possible about myself and my business. And I have actually not really ever been close to quitting my business, but like that one time I was like, I'm considering quitting my business. And that's the only time I've ever been close to, but like I was that upset by this. And so what I want to tell you, maybe you're in that same boat. I want to tell you, someone can have an opinion of you that you can decide isn't true. It can be true for them, but not for you. And you don't have to let their hurtful words be true for you. And I love this quote. I'm going to quote Brene Brown again here, but it's a little bit of a long one, but this speaks so much to this. So she says, a lot of cheap seats in the arena are filled with people who never venture onto the floor. They just sit, hurl mean-spirited criticisms and put-downs from a safe distance. The problem is when we stop caring what people think and stop feeling hurt by cruelty, we lose our ability to connect. But when we are defined by what people think, we lose the courage to be vulnerable. Therefore, we need to be selective about the feedback we let into our lives. And I love that so much. Like she's saying, you know, the whole idea of sticks and stones can break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Like that's just not true. And I think like we shouldn't stop caring what people think about us. That like she says, that hurts our ability to connect with people. But we also need to not be defined by what people are saying about us. So be selective about the feedback you let into your lives, and you can be selective about this person's feedback. So here's what I want to tell you to do with any hateful words that have been spoken over to you by this client or by like anyone. Honestly, this applies to all areas of our lives. So it's a little journaling exercise here. So I want you to write down the beliefs that are holding you back or making you upset, all of them on paper. So it's really, you're writing down your thoughts on what this person said. So maybe they said like, you're the most unprofessional business person they've ever worked with or something like that. So you can write that down that like you're feeling that because they said it. You know what I'm saying? Okay, so I actually found my journal from forever ago when I had this really bad situation, and I did this journaling exercise, and I want to read some of what I wrote. I actually read this on an old podcast on the Q&A I did a while back about starting a business. I kind of mentioned this, so if you heard it before, that's where. But I literally wrote as like what I was feeling. I wrote, I'm not good enough at my job. Maybe I should go back to doing something else. I'm not as far along as I should be. So those were a few of the things I was feeling because of that situation. And then the next thing, like once you get it all out on paper, like really like scrape your brain for like what is going on in here. Everything, like the thing that's like the thought that's the farthest away from like your consciousness that you might not even realize you're thinking it. Like go deep, figure out everything you're thinking. And then I want you to ask the question, can I poke holes in any of this? Are these facts or are they limiting beliefs? Are they facts or are they something some person I don't really care about their opinion said about me? Going back to the Brene Brown quote, you have to be selective about the feedback you let into your life. Are those mean-spirited criticisms and put-downs or are they honest truth? Okay, so ask if you can poke holes in it. And I was able to. Like I wrote, kind of looking at that situation, I have so many happy clients that prove I'm good at what I do, even though I know I can always be improving. I love what I do, even when it's challenging. And then I wrote, I'm right where God wants me to be, and I can choose to stop comparing myself. Because I was also having some comparison issues going on at that time. So those were kind of the responses I wrote in that situation. Like, and that was a great example too of like, I had someone kind of telling me like, you're really bad at what you do. But alternatively, the other clients I was working with at that exact same time were extremely satisfied and we had great project experiences. So it really was like this one situation felt so different from the others that it did make me have to say like, wait, I can poke holes in that. Other clients can poke holes in that. And like, I don't have to believe everything this person is saying. But on that same note, I also want to encourage you to look for truth in the client's feedback as a way to improve your business or to improve yourself personally. However, but don't look at it as a way to define you. It is not helpful to be defined by what other people say about us. It's helpful to be defined by what the people you love most say and taking their feedback by what the Lord says about you and what you believe about yourself. So don't let this person's like mean comments define you. And like I said, I do not know your specific situation, but you listening right now, I hear you. You know it well enough to know what's true and what isn't about a hurtful comment. And with emotional maturity, you can use that to decipher what the comment was and move forward with that information in a way that actually benefits you. Okay, to close out that section, I love this quote from Eleanor Roosevelt. She says, remember, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. Going back to like, people can say whatever they want. You choose what you get to do with that information. You can't control other people's actions, but you control how you respond to it. So this is a time for you to be like super in tune with your emotions and paying attention to what you're feeling, to how you're acting, to how something's affecting you. All right, that was a longer one. So that's the last one though. Number 10, don't let people who you don't respect speak things over you. And you guys, that is it. And this was actually less long than I expected it to be recording wise, but I really hope this episode helped someone today. And if it helped you, please let me know. Send me a message on Instagram or Facebook or an email to our team. Leave a podcast review and let me know what this episode helped you with. I would love to hear from you. If you have a friend, this is a big one here, you guys. If you have a friend who's a fellow business owner who's like going through something like this, please send them this episode. That is such a huge thing. Like when a friend sends me a podcast that speaks to like exactly what I needed, it is a hallelujah from me. Thank you. So share this with someone who needs it. And my final advice, I'm going to leave you with a little final advice for you who's in the midst of this difficult situation with a client. Breathe. Take a break. You're done listening to this episode, but that doesn't mean your break has to stop. You can keep taking a break from the situation. See this person you're so mad at as a human who has their own struggles that you don't understand. Pray and pray and pray about it. Journal your prayer. Go on a walk and talk to the Lord about it. Pray about it. Talk to someone you love and trust about it. And be okay. Like, talk to someone you can vent with. Like, I vented to my dad about it. I vented to my husband Adam about it. You can vent. And then communicate with more intention than you ever have before. Like, know that your words really matter in these situations. And when you're on this call with the client or meeting with them in person, communicate with honesty, vulnerability, and with leadership, and be really intentional with your words. Okay. And then last thing, come back next week for more on this topic. Or if you're listening to this in the future, just literally go to the episode after this one to talk about preventing difficult client situations from ever happening. So if some of what I've shared in this episode was like, my situation wasn't that difficult, but I certainly don't want what you're talking about to happen to me, then you want to come back to next week's episode, because we're going to talk about a lot of prevention things of like how to make projects run smoothly no matter what industry you're in. And so, yeah, listen to that one. And it was a difficult decision for me to actually decide how to divide these episodes up, because so much of it is overlapping information, but I really wanted to be able to speak to two camps. So that's how we divided it up. So you can do this. Everything's going to be okay. You are strong. You've got this. And I'm going to close you guys with a Bob Goff quote. I've got a lot of quotes in this episode because I think this one can really relate to the emotions you might be feeling right now. So here's what he says. The way we love people we disagree with is the best evidence of what we really believe. So think about that. How can you love the client when you disagree with them or feel hurt with them to show what you really believe? All right, that is it, you guys. I really hope this helped, and I'll be back next week with how to prevent difficult client situations. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to the podcast this week, friend. I appreciate you being here. And hey, if you enjoyed this episode, I want to tell you about something. I would encourage you to check out my website template shop. Over on elizabethmccravey.com, you'll find Show It website templates, and they are easy to use, strategically designed, and created to help you book more clients and customers. Maybe your current website is really boring. I don't know, maybe it is, and maybe you don't want to hurt its feelings, but you know it's true. And your website needs to be strategically and intentionally designed in order for it to convert your viewers into raving customers. And that's what these website templates do on MShop. These are pre-made website templates built for the Show It platform where you can plug and play your content into the template with ease and then get started with a website that is made to actually make you money. Isn't that what we all want, right? So go shop the templates at elizabethmccravey.com/shop. That link is also in the show notes. And don't forget that you can actually subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening so that you never miss an episode. And I would so appreciate it if you left a rating and review for the show on Apple Podcasts, or even just share it with a friend. It's a great way to support the show and then give us your feedback. So thanks so much for listening.